Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today, we are opening a can of history, culture, and some very, very recent corporate drama. For you, our focus is the Campbell's Company. I mean, it's a brand that is maybe the very definition of an American institution.
It really is. It's an image that's just so universally recognized. You see that red and white label, that metallic bronze seal, and you instantly know what it is. But the company's story is, far richer and way more complicated than just a simple can of tomato soup. Over 156 years, Campbell's hasn't just been selling comfort food. It's really been a mirror reflecting these massive changes in industrial science and advertising, high art consumer health demands, and as we've learned pretty recently, facing some significant environmental and ethical challenges right up to late 2025.
Absolutely. And our mission today is to go far beyond that familiar icon and really deep dive into the evolution of Campbell's. We've collected detailed corporate histories, financial breakdowns, and the crucial legal and regulatory context that really defines their modern operation. We're going to explore a groundbreaking invention that changed logistics forever, trace its massive brand portfolio, which now includes names, like Pepperidge Farm, Pace, Snyder's Lance.
Right.
Explore its surprising connection to Andy Warhol, and then analyze how it's handling some really serious corporate upheaval.
It's a story of a company that's constantly defining itself through flux. I mean, they're adding entire companies while taking away key ingredients like water, and sometimes, unfortunately, taking away environmental compliance. We're taking this whole stack of sources, and we're going to distill exactly what you need to know about this powerhouse's enduring, but definitely turbulent, journey through American business.
Okay, so let's unpack this from the very, very beginning. The initial partnership in 1869 in South Jersey, it seems almost accidental, right? It brought together two very different skill sets.
It was definitely unexpected. I mean, the company was founded by Joseph A. Campbell, who was primarily a fruit merchant. He was working out of Bridgeton, New Jersey. And his partner was Abraham Anderson, who was in the completely separate business of manufacturing ice boxes.
So you have fresh produce on one side and preservation technology on the other.
Exactly. And that combination, it really set the stage for what they first offered.
And their early product lineup, it reflected that wide-ranging scope. It made them less of a soup company and more of a general preserving house.
Yeah.
We see that they were canning everything: tomatoes, vegetables, jellies, soups, condiments, even minced meats. They were basically masters of the shelf-stable pantry.
Precisely. They were the Joseph A. Campbell Preserve Company, and preserve was really the key word there. But that original partnership, it didn't even last a decade. By 1876, Anderson was out. He left the partnership. But what's fascinating to me is how interwoven these families stayed. Abraham Anderson's son, Campbell Spielman, actually stayed on with the firm as a creative director.
And Spielman's contribution is actually monumental, though I feel like it's often forgotten, right?
Oh, crucially so. It's reported that Campbell Spielman was the original designer of the iconic Campbell's soup cans. So the man who designed the packaging that would become a global symbol, the one Andy Warhol immortalized, was the son of the partner who had quit the business early on.
Wow.
Yeah, it really speaks volumes about the close-knit nature of business ownership back in the late 19th century.
So the next major pivot happens when Joseph Campbell retires in 1894. Arthur Dorrance takes the helm as president. But the real game changer, he arrives in 1897 in the form of Arthur's nephew, John T. Dorrance. And this is where science really enters the chat.
This is truly the inflection point. This is where a modest preserving company turns into a logistical marvel. And John Dorrance wasn't just some guy they hired. He was an incredibly qualified chemist. His educational background is seriously impressive. He had degrees from MIT, and for the cutting-edge chemistry of the era, he studied at Göttingen University in Germany. So he brought this serious, international-level scientific rigor to a canning operation.
Which makes his starting wage all the more remarkable. I mean, frankly, it was a massive risk for him. He started at only $7.50 a week.
It's almost unbelievable today. We contextualized that figure, and $7.50 a week in 1897 was equivalent to about $253 in 2022.
That's nothing.
It's not a princely sum, even for the time, especially for someone with his credentials. So what does that tell you? It suggests that Dorrance didn't join for the salary. He joined because he believed his intellectual property, his scientific concept was revolutionary, and that it would rapidly reward him in the form of, equity or ownership down the line. It was a bet on his own genius.
And that bet paid off almost immediately, because the genius was the commercially viable method for condensing soup.
This was revolutionary, but it was also deceptively simple. Dorrance realized that the heaviest ingredient in the soup was just water. So by developing a technique to perfectly concentrate the flavor and the nutrients, he could have the amount of water needed inside the can.
And if we connect this to the bigger picture, it changes everything about the logistics of food. Before condensation, you were shipping these massive, heavy cans that were 50% water, which is just extremely expensive to move, to store, to display.
Exactly. Dorrance's condensation process dramatically cut shipping weight and volume. It effectively halved the cost of transporting the product from New Jersey to anywhere in the country. And this single innovation, it made soup affordable for the working class and accessible nationwide. Think about the sheer convenience for the consumer. Instead of boiling down ingredients for hours or having this expensive, heavy, ready-to-eat soup, you could just buy a compact, cheap paste, open it, add water, and heat it up. It changed kitchen labor overnight.
It's an incredible efficiency loop that fuels the company's first massive growth spurt.
Yeah.
And the condensation process was so successful that Dorrance quickly rose to the top. He became president from 1914 to 1930 and then eventually bought out the entire founding Campbell family.
And that's the ultimate payoff for his initial $7.50 bet. The control shifted entirely to the Dorrance lineage, built on the back of his scientific innovation.
So we have the invention, which is the heart of the business. Now we need the face, the look. Before 1898, the cans were, pretty generic, but that year, they adopted the universally recognized red and white color scheme. What was the inspiration for that?
It's one of the great accidental branding stories, really. An executive named Herberton Williams was responsible for the redesign, and he was completely taken by the crisp carnelian red color of the uniforms worn by the Cornell University football team.
No way, a football uniform.
Yes. That specific, deep, vibrant carnelian red became the signature color that defines the brand to this day.
That's amazing. A university football uniform provides the color palette for an American food icon. But beyond the color, there's another crucial detail that speaks to their early commitment to quality and prestige, and that's the metallic seal.
The metallic bronze medal seal is such a powerful brand anchor. It signifies the award Campbell's won at the 1900 Paris exhibition. They embedded that prestige right onto the packaging, turning a temporary marketing award into a permanent fixture of their visual identity. It was a constant promise of quality.
And we learned a really granular detail about the seal itself. They initially used the French description of the exhibition, but then eventually shifted the language.
That's right. The original seal featured the formal French phrase, Exposition Universelle Internationale. They eventually changed that to the English translation, Paris International Exposition. It's a subtle shift, but it's a telling one. It reflects a movement away from, the need to constantly signal European prestige, and instead squarely focusing on optimizing the brand's appeal for the massive, lucrative, and rapidly industrializing American market. It just solidified a perfect identity. Scientifically brilliant, visually iconic, and internationally recognized.
The can is definitely a visual masterpiece, but Campbell's didn't become a household word through cans alone. They invested heavily in advertising that produced some of the most enduring pieces of Americana and some truly sticky slogans.
Slogans are where Campbell's truly excelled in connecting emotionally with consumers. And if we look at the most powerful one, it's essentially the sound of satisfaction. Good.
It's brilliant in its simplicity. And what's truly remarkable is its longevity. It launched in 1935 and still used today. That makes it the company's predominantly used slogan, running for nearly a century. It just taps into that primal, comforting connection to food.
It really does. It captures that exact moment of contentment when you take a bite of something warm and familiar. But they did pivot through different eras. In the late 1960s and early 70s, as society became more focused on leisure and aspiration, they shifted to Give Me the Campbell Life. That was from 1969 to 1975.
That feels like a very different vibe, more aspirational, connecting soup to a specific, comfortable lifestyle rather than just, comfort food.
And then, when economic realities changed in the mid-70s, they adopted a much more pragmatic, direct approach. Soup is good food, which ran until the early 80s. That slogan was almost defensive, or maybe utilitarian. It focused on the simple, reliable nutritional value. It was a statement of fact in a world of complex food choices.
And in the modern era, they've shifted again. They've recognized that convenience and authenticity are paramount for younger consumers. The current slogan is Made for Real, Real Life, which they started in 2015.
And that slogan is all about bridging the gap between their traditional legacy and modern lifestyle demands. It highlights convenience without sacrificing that feeling of authenticity. It's an acknowledgement that people are busy, and Campbell's fits into that reality.
Speaking of Americana, we have to talk about the collectibles that came out of their promotional campaigns. The Campbell's Kids are perhaps the best-known example.
The kids were designed by the illustrator Grace Drayton, and they were essential to defining the brand's wholesome, family-friendly image. They were chubby, cheerful, and they suggested that Campbell's wasn't just cheap food, but high-quality, healthy nourishment for children. They created the first wave of brand-driven collectibles for the company.
But the brand's reach wasn't just limited to illustrations. It extended directly into high-profile media, right at a moment of accidental peak cultural relevance.
This is where the story is really fascinating. Campbell's took over the sponsorship of Orson Welles' famous radio program, which had been the Mercury Theater on the air. They rebranded it as the Campbell Playhouse.
And the timing, as you noted, is the key here.
It is. Campbell stepped in and took over the sponsorship in December 1938. What had happened just 2 months before that? Welles' stunningly realistic War of the Worlds broadcast, which had caused an accidental mass panic across the country.
Wow. Right.
So Campbell's immediately capitalized on the program's sensational fame. They associated their incredibly reliable pantry staple product with a program known for dramatic, high-quality, and now notorious entertainment. They were basically buying instant notoriety.
That's just brilliant corporate maneuvering. And then decades later, the brand even had a presidential spokesman.
Indeed. Ronald Reagan was a spokesman for V8 vegetable juice after Campbell's acquired that brand in 1948. It's a great piece of trivia, linking the future president of the United States to a key product in the expanding Campbell's portfolio.
Now, we absolutely cannot discuss the cultural significance of the can without discussing the high watermark of its artistic recognition. Andy Warhol.
Warhol didn't just paint the can. He elevated this utilitarian, mass-produced object to the status of high modern art. Starting in 1962, he incorporated that familiar red and white look into a massive series of pop art silkscreens, and it instantly positioned Campbell's not just as a food product, but as a ubiquitous, instantly recognizable symbol of modern American industrial production and consumption.
And we learned that the first batch in 1962, it consisted of 32 canvases.
Right, and that number is important. Those initial 32 canvases were not random. They were meticulously accurate representations of the 32 distinct flavors Campbell's offered at the time. It gave them an archival, almost taxonomic quality, treating the variety of soup cans like museum specimens of consumerism.
But he didn't stop there. He didn't just replicate the can. He started playing with the image.
That's right. As the series progressed, Warhol's versions became much more experimental, more surrealistic. He moved away from simple replication and began playing with negative reversed color schemes and varied techniques, much like he did with his celebrity portraits later in the decade. The image was so strong, so embedded in the public psyche, that he could abstract it, manipulate it, and it would still be instantly recognizable as a Campbell's can.
And the ultimate proof of this icon status is the astonishing market value these pieces command. They transformed a dime store item into millions of dollars of art.
It's a stunning indicator of cultural power. We saw the example of small-torn Campbell soup can, Pepper Pot, which was created in 1962. It sold for $11.8 million at auction in 2006.
$11.8 million.
Yeah, think about that valuation. A torn piece of canvas featuring a Pepper Pot soup can, created only 4 decades earlier, commanding millions. That figure speaks volumes about how the logo transcends mere branding and becomes an actual piece of 20th century cultural currency.
So Campbell's had the genius invention and the cultural icon status, but to transition from a single product company into a diversified corporate powerhouse, that required a huge strategic shift. And that really starts in the mid-century.
The crucial era is the leadership of William Beverly Murphy. He was president and CEO from 1953 to 1972. And his biggest initial move was taking the corporation public. This was fundamental. It opened the gates to the capital markets, providing the enormous amounts of cash necessary for the strategic acquisitions that would define the company for the next 7 decades. He moved Campbell's decisively from a family-controlled business into a modern, publicly traded conglomerate.
And he didn't waste any time expanding the brand portfolio beyond just soup. He began strategically acquiring companies that are themselves now staples in American kitchens.
Under Murphy, the company acquired Pepperidge Farms baked goods in 1961. This was a critical step toward diversification, moving from canned, condensed goods to premium, packaged baked goods. They also brought in Franco-American V8 vegetable juices, Swanson broths, and notably, the luxury brand Godiva chocolates. Yeah, It was a massive push across multiple food categories, from everyday broths to high-end treats.
Wait, if we step back, acquiring Godiva seems like a really unique strategic move for a company whose strength is industrial efficiency and long shelf life. Was that ever a natural fit?
Well, it was an attempt to capture a different market segment, luxury and gifting, but as we'll see later, it didn't stick in the long run. The core competency of Campbell's was always the mass market and an efficient supply chain and high-end luxury confectionery. That just requires a totally different approach to retail and marketing. It illustrates that diversification isn't always smooth.
Speaking of deviations, the sources detail a very curious detour they took during the 1970s and 80s, a brief foray into the restaurant business.
This is one of those strange chapters that shows the company was actively searching for new growth vectors. They acquired several regional restaurant chains, including Pietro's Pizza, Annabelle's, Clark, and Herfe's. They even launched their own concepts like Hanover Trail and H.T. McDougall's. It was a massive deviation from their core competency of shelf-stable goods. Managing restaurant logistics, fresh inventory, customer service, it just proved too far afield. And the venture was short-lived. It served as a lesson that sometimes, sticking to what you do best is the best strategy.
Okay, fast forward to the 21st century, and the acquisition strategy becomes even more aggressive and strategic. This time, it's explicitly aimed at diversifying away from canned goods, which we're seeing slowing sales, and reaching younger, more health-conscious consumers.
That strategic pivot was absolutely necessary. Canned soup, the center of the store, was in decline, and consumers were flocking to the store perimeter, the refrigerated sections, fresh produce, premium snacks. Campbell's had to buy its way into that new reality.
So let's look at some of these massive modern acquisitions. In 2012, they spent heavily on Bolthouse Farms.
They acquired Bolthouse Farms, known for juices, refrigerated salad dressings, baby carrots, for $1.55 billion. This move was analyzed by market experts as Campbell's literally buying their way onto the refrigerated shelf. It was an explicit, multi-billion-dollar attempt to appeal to those younger, more affluent consumers who are prioritizing fresh goods over pantry staples.
Then a push for massive international scope in 2013 with the Kelsen Group.
Kelsen was a Danish multinational baked goods company that came with an enormous built-in 85-country distribution network. This was a bold play for international expansion, especially trying to get a foothold in high-growth Asian markets like China. Now, they eventually sold Kelsen in 2019, but it shows their global ambitions at the time were really serious.
And moving into the mid-2010s, they doubled down on fresh and organic, acquiring the salsa maker Garden Fresh Gourmet in 2015.
Yeah, at $231 million, this acquisition was a clear signal that the company was committed to moving into the fresh, organic, and refrigerated packaged food space. Salsas and fresh dips are high-turnover items that appeal directly to the consumer they were trying to capture.
But the truly transformational period, it came in 2017 and 2018 with a back-to-back acquisition of Pacific Foods of Oregon and, in the largest deal in company history, Snyder's-Lance.
Pacific Foods cost $700 million and immediately solidified their organic broth and natural food presence. But the Snyder's-Lance deal, that was the game changer. $4.87 billion in cash. This acquisition fully transformed Campbell's overnight from a soup company with snacks into a major dominant snack food player.
That's a huge cash outlay. Why was that massive deal so strategically necessary?
It was about stabilizing revenue and accessing growth. The snack category is high margin and fast moving. Snyder's-Lance brought in an incredible range of high equity brands. You've got Snyder's of Hanover pretzels, Cape Cod potato chips, Kettle potato chips, and the trendy Late July Snacks brand. It instantly diversified their revenue streams and moved the emphasis squarely towards snacking. It insulated them from the ongoing decline in center store canned goods sales.
And they continued that expansion recently, showing that the appetite for high-end branded goods is still strong, with the 2023 acquisition of Sovos brands for $2.7 billion.
The growth appetite is insatiable. If you look at the breadth of the current portfolio, Campbell's is now a complex food conglomerate. Their flagship Campbell's brand covers everything from the traditional concentrated soups to the ready-to-eat lines like Chunky, the healthier, my premium slow kettle style, plus classics like SpaghettiOs.
And we noted the success of the Chunky brand line. They actually gained a trademark on that word in 2019.
That just underscores its importance. Chunky soup had sold over $450 million a year between 2004 and 2017. Gaining a trademark on a descriptive word like that is incredibly difficult, and it just proves how much commercial weight that single product line carried for decades.
So beyond the main brand, the scope is just enormous. Let's briefly recap the portfolio to show listeners what they actually own now.
Absolutely. Pepperidge Farm, acquired in 1961, is still a powerhouse. It covers breads, crackers like Goldfish, another household icon, and premium cookies like Milano and Sausalito. They own Pace Foods, the salsa and picante sauce brand acquired in 95. And critically, the Snyder's-Lance subsidiary brings in that massive snack stable, Snyder's of Hanover pretzels, Cape Cod potato chips, and the growing Late July snacks brand. When you look at the total portfolio, Campbell's has managed to touch nearly every major grocery store aisle, successfully navigating the shift from simple condensation to complex food manufacturing.
The sheer size and history of Campbell's mean it faces intense scrutiny, especially in areas of health, environment, and corporate transparency. And the sources reveal a long, contentious battle, particularly around sodium content.
This is the ongoing tension that legacy food companies constantly battle. It's balancing the taste profile that consumers expect, which often requires salt for flavor and preservation, with modern dietary demands, which require lower sodium levels to combat hypertension and other health issues. Many of Campbell's canned soups contain relatively high quantities of sodium.
They did make efforts to be responsive to public health pressures, at least initially. Campbell's claimed reduced sodium in many of their lines, and they even received a Certificate of Excellence from Blood Pressure Canada in 2007 for their sodium-lowering initiatives. That seemed like a genuine push toward healthier products.
It was. But what happens when health conflicts with the bottom line? The corporate reality, as we learned, forced a reversal. In 2011, the company cited sinking sales, which means consumers weren't enthusiastically embracing the lower salt versions, and they increased the salt content of many of their products again. Taste and consumer habit often trump health concerns in the supermarket aisle, and Campbell's, as a public company, responded directly to the sales figures.
Wait, so they won a health award for reducing sodium, and then just a few years later, when the sales numbers weren't where they needed them to be, they fundamentally undermined that health positioning by putting the salt back in. Doesn't that just fundamentally compromise their integrity, especially with lines like Healthy Request?
It raises some very serious questions about their commitment, and the scrutiny over their claims was intense. A 2010 ABC News report specifically challenged their health-focused marketing. The testing found huge contradictions. For instance, a variety they promoted as low sodium was found to contain the exact same amount of sodium as the regular version.
That is misleading on a staggering level.
It is. And even more counterintuitively, the Healthy Request soup line, which you'd assume is designed to be lean, was found in testing to contain more fat than the regular standard variety. This really highlights the complexity and sometimes, the cynical reality of food labeling. It's not always what it seems, and it requires consumers to be vigilant.
Moving from the ingredients inside the can to the can itself, there was a major public health concern raised in the late 2000s regarding bisphenol A, or BPA. That's a chemical used in the lining of many canned foods.
Right, BPA became a huge concern because of studies linking it to potential hormonal disruption. A 2009 Consumer Reports study put major canned food companies, including Campbell's, under the microscope, and the study found that their tinned products, in some cases, contained BPA levels over 100 parts per billion.
And the risk assessment provided by that testing was quite alarming in terms of recommended daily exposure.
It certainly was. The analysis suggested that consuming just one serving of certain canned foods could potentially exceed an expert's recommended daily exposure limit of 0.2 micrograms per kilogram of body weight per day. This forced Campbell's and the entire canned food industry to invest heavily in finding and implementing safer, BPA-free lining alternatives. It just goes to show that the container itself can become a source of intense regulatory pressure.
Then we have the evolving stance on GMOs, genetically modified organisms, which highlights a major shift in their public policy position driven entirely by consumer politics.
For a long time, Campbell's was staunchly opposed to mandatory GMO labeling. In 2012, they were very active in the political debate. They contributed $500,000 to a campaign opposing California's Proposition 37, which aimed for mandatory labeling of foods containing GMO ingredients.
What were the core arguments against Prop 37?
Well, like many major food corporations, they argued that mandatory labeling would be hugely impractical. They claimed it would create a complex, costly tracking system that would ultimately increase costs for consumers. They felt that if California implemented it, other states would follow, creating a logistical nightmare for supply chains. They saw it as regulatory overreach that didn't provide a real benefit to consumer safety, but mainly served as a fear tactic.
But despite that $500,000 investment against it, the tide of public opinion eventually forced a complete corporate reversal 4 years later.
Absolutely. In January 2016, Campbell's decided to officially support mandatory labeling. They announced they would label all their products that contained GMO additives. And this was a critical moment for the industry. Campbell's realized that consumer demand for transparency was an unstoppable force. They chose to get ahead of potential federal regulation and demonstrate proactive transparency, accepting that hiding the information was doing more brand damage than labeling it would.
Finally, we must address the very recent environmental violations. The sources detail a serious incident that the company admitted to in September 2025.
This is a severe failure of corporate responsibility and a major black mark. Campbell's admitted to multiple violations of the Clean Water Act. The source material specifies that their Napoleon, Ohio canning plant dumped millions of gallons of food waste into the Maumee River over a shocking period of 6.5 years.
The Maumee River feeds Lake Erie, which is a major drinking water and ecological resource for millions of people. 6.5 years indicates a systemic, long-term operational failure, not just an accident.
It really underscores the environmental cost of large-scale, industrial-age food manufacturing. The company, which was founded on the brilliance of industrial efficiency, allowed that industrial infrastructure to become a long-term polluter. This violation connects their legacy of massive production volume directly to the 21st century demand for corporate environmental accountability. The eventual admission in 2025 was forced by regulatory action, not internal discovery.
As we move into the present day, we see a company that is constantly reorganizing its operational footprint and its very identity to reflect its new, global, snack-focused reality.
Yeah, operational shifts in a company this old are often painful. We saw the closure of their original Camden, New Jersey, plant number 1, which resulted in the loss of about 1,000 jobs in 1991. More recently, they closed their Toronto, Canada factory in 2018, which had operated since 1930, shifting production to U.S. facilities and losing 380 jobs.
These closures are driven by consolidation and the never-ending search for efficiency, but it's important to note the enduring link to their home city.
Despite shutting down manufacturing there, Campbell's still maintains its non-manufacturing world headquarters in Camden, New Jersey, and continues its charity involvement in the city. It keeps that vital link to their history, even as the manufacturing itself shifts south.
The company has also been aggressively modernizing its corporate image and listing structure. In August 2024, they transferred their stock listing from the historic New York Stock Exchange to the NASDAQ Global Select Market.
That move is symbolic. The NYSE is associated with legacy industrial power. NASDAQ is associated with growth, technology, and future-forward thinking. The transfer signals to investors that Campbell's sees itself less as an old-school food company and more as a multifaceted consumer brand leveraging modern distribution and marketing.
And the biggest identity shift of all happened in late 2024, the name change.
This is a huge, deliberate, strategic move. Announced in September 2024 and finalized in November 2024, they officially changed their name from the Campbell Soup Company to the Campbell's Company. And this is more than just semantics. They are consciously moving away from explicitly defining themselves by a single, condensed product soup to embracing the broader, multi-brand identity of Campbell's as a master brand that equally includes Goldfish crackers, Milano cookies, and kettle chips.
It acknowledges the post-Snyder's-Lance reality. They are now a snack and prepared foods giant that also happens to sell soup, not just a soup company that owns some snacks. And shedding non-core assets has been crucial to funding this transformation.
Divestitures are key for focus and capital generation. They shed Godiva in 2007, Kelsen and Arnott's Biscuits in 2019 and 2020, and even Pop's Secret Popcorn in August 2024. Every sale helps refine the portfolio and provide capital for the next big acquisition.
But all this corporate restructuring was quickly overshadowed by major leadership and legal turmoil in late 2025 that takes us right up to the minute.
The year started with a high-profile leadership transition. Mark Klaus retired as CEO to become the team president of the NFL's Washington Commanders. Mick Beekhuizen succeeded him in February 2025. This kind of high-level shuffle always invites instability, but it was the dramatic lawsuit filed later that year that truly threatened the brand.
The sources detail a November 2025 lawsuit filed by a former cybersecurity analyst named Robert Garza. What exactly did the lawsuit allege regarding the corporate environment?
Garza alleged that he was wrongfully terminated after complaining about explicitly racist comments made by a senior executive, Martin Bally, during a meeting in November 2024. This points to a severe internal culture issue that directly contradicts the wholesome image the company tries so hard to project.
But the situation escalated from an internal cultural problem to a massive public image disaster with the release of an alleged recording.
Yes. Garza allegedly released a recording that he claims captures the executive, Martin Bally, in an expletive-filled rant. And the content of that alleged rant is truly explosive because it targeted the company's core product, its quality, and most damagingly, its core customer base.
So the claims in the alleged recording essentially suggested internal contempt for their own customers.
That's the most damaging part. The alleged recording claims the executive stated that Campbell's makes food for poor people and that the executives themselves don't want to eat it. This suggests a total disconnect and disdain between the people running the company and the millions of working-class families who rely on their condensed soups.
And if that wasn't explosive enough for a company built on simple, wholesome staples, the recording allegedly attacked the quality of the ingredients themselves.
Exactly. The recording allegedly claimed that the meat used in some of their products was bioengineered and came from a 3D printer. This is a staggering accusation coming from a high-level corporate insider that immediately conjures images of synthetic, low-quality, factory-made food. It undermines the entire 156-year legacy built on simplicity and reliability.
So you have a brand immortalized by Warhol as the ultimate symbol of reliable American consumption, and suddenly an executive is allegedly claiming their product is bioengineered food they wouldn't feed their own families. What kind of damage does that do to brand trust?
It creates a massive crisis. Consumers buy that red and white can because of familiarity and trust. When an executive allegedly suggests a core product is low quality, meant only for a low-income demographic, and may contain futuristic, potentially synthetic ingredients, it challenges the very premise of that century-old trust. It forces the customer to ask, what exactly am I eating?
So what was the immediate corporate outcome of this massive public relations disaster?
The outcome was swift. Later that same month, November 2025, the executive, Martin Bally, was dismissed by the Campbell's company. The rapid dismissal suggests the company prioritized protecting its public image and addressing the severe cultural and ethical allegations contained within the lawsuit and the alleged recording. They were trying to send a clear message that those attitudes would not be tolerated.
A dramatic end to a 156-year journey that spans from icebox manufacturers to allegations of 3D printed meat. #tagoutro.
This deep dive has shown us that Campbell's is far more than just the comforting image on the can. It's a masterclass in corporate reinvention, starting with the simple genius of condensation and transforming into a massive snap and food conglomerate through billions of dollars in strategic acquisitions.
We've seen the extraordinary cultural weight of the brand, immortalized by Warhol and remembered through slogans like, good. But this legacy brand now faces the complex challenge of balancing that nostalgia with unforgiving modern demands for health, transparency, and corporate ethics. As demonstrated by the sodium paradox, the pervasive BPA concern, the systemic Clean Water Act violations, and the extraordinarily damaging executive scandal of 2025.
The strategic pivot from Campbell Soup Company to the Campbell's Company marks a symbolic shift. It signifies that their financial future is tied up in the snack aisle, goldfish, Milano, and kettle chips, as much as it is in cream of mushroom soup.
And here's a final thought for you to chew on. The company's entire history has been defined by adding ingredients, new brands, new products, and taking things away. First water, then inefficient factories, then salt, and finally, executives who threatened the brand's integrity. Given that a former high-level executive allegedly claimed their food was bioengineered and from a 3D printer, how will this 156-year-old institution reconcile its iconic, simple past with a future potentially dominated by synthetic foods, intense health scrutiny, and complex scrutinized global supply chains? What does the immediate and decisive dismissal of that executive suggest about how Campbell's truly values and must protect its core working-class customer base? The deep dive ends here, but your thought process should not.